Story 1. This happened a few years ago, back when I was still living with my parents during my last couple of years at home before heading off to college. Around that time, my parents bought a new home and moved us in. It was far away from the city, and even most of the suburbs. Isolated, surrounded by woods, and huge. It felt like a mansion to me, even if it was just the three of us living there. Their reasoning for buying such a large house was that the family often stayed with us, so I guess they figured the extra space was justified. But during this particular week, it was actually the opposite. My parents had flown out to visit family, and I stayed behind to keep up with school and avoid having to catch up later. I had the house to myself. Almost immediately, I realized I didn't like being alone in that house. It was too big. Too many long hallways. Too many spare rooms sitting empty. It didn't help that the place was over a century old. It had a creepy energy to it. I was old enough to brush it off, but the feeling of uneasiness never fully went away. For the first 2 days while my parents were gone, everything was fine. I went to school, hung out with friends afterward, then came home and chilled. But on the third day, something changed. After school, I grabbed food with my buddies and didn't get home until around 6 or 7 p.m. It was already getting dark, and I was tired, ready to just collapse in bed. As I came in, I dropped my backpack by the door and headed upstairs. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the spare bedroom doors down the hallway was open. It immediately unsettled me. I didn't assume anything serious had happened, but I could have sworn that door had been closed. I walked over to peek inside, just a bed, some furniture, nothing unusual. Still, I closed the door and tried to shake the feeling. What bothered me most was that I passed that hallway every day. If the door had been open earlier, I would have noticed. I hated open doors in that house. Something about walking past a series of pitch-dark, open rooms creeped me out more than anything. Still, I did a quick walk-through of the house, not checking every room, just making sure nothing was obviously wrong. I told myself maybe the door hadn't been closed all the way and drifted open while I was out. Nothing to worry about. So I went to my room, turned on the TV, and tried to settle in. But I couldn't shake the weird feeling. That house was too big for one person. Too quiet. Too many unknowns hiding behind closed doors. After about 45 minutes, I started to feel hungry and made my way to the kitchen downstairs. Another strange thing about that house, very few lights were ever on at once. Walking around meant passing a lot of dark rooms and eerie shadows. As I cooked, I kept thinking I saw movement in the living room. Every time I looked up, the room was empty, but my eyes kept playing tricks on me. I told myself I was being paranoid, gave myself a mental pep talk, and tried to ignore the growing tension in my chest. I finished dinner and started heading back upstairs. That's when I saw it again. The same spare room door was wide open. A chill ran through my whole body. I froze, staring down the dark hallway. I couldn't move for almost a full minute. My brain refused to make sense of what I was seeing. Was someone in the house? Was I losing it? I crept down the hall toward the door. Pushed it open a bit more and looked inside. Nothing. Everything was exactly as it was earlier. I scanned the floor for footprints, for something moved, a sign, anything. But it was spotless. Still, I was unnerved. I backed out, went to my room, and locked the door behind me. Trying not to panic, I texted my parents. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I casually asked if they'd ever noticed the spare room door opening on its own or if it had a loose latch or something. They replied quickly, no, they hadn't noticed anything strange about it. I didn't push the issue. Told them it was probably nothing. But my gut told me something wasn't right. Something was off. I sat on my bed, eating and watching TV, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. Maybe 10 minutes passed before I heard it, footsteps in the hallway. My heart started pounding. I scrambled to grab the remote and paused the TV just in time to hear a thump right outside my bedroom door. Silence. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then came a soft, slow knock, almost like a tap, on the other side of the door. It was so light, it was chilling. I sat frozen, unsure what to do. It felt like a dream. Surreal. For what felt like a minute, there was no more knocking. Then I managed to call out, trying to sound brave. Who's out there? I've called the cops already. It was a lie, of course, but I hoped it would scare them off. No response. Just 3 more soft knocks. Same slow rhythm. That's when I actually picked up the phone and called 911. I gave them my address and told them someone was standing outside my door. As I was explaining, I heard it, a loud scratching sound. Like someone dragging metal, maybe a knife, along the wood of the door. That's when I lost it. I pleaded with the operator to send someone fast. As I spoke, the door handle began jiggling, like someone was trying to open it. Thank God I had locked it. After a minute of this, it stopped. Another round of 3 knocks. Then silence. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat completely still, heart racing, straining to hear anything else. But whoever had been outside my room was now gone. When the police finally arrived, they searched the house. Nothing. No intruder. No forced entry. But there was one thing they did find, a long, deep gash on the back of my door, clear evidence that someone had tried to cut or carve into it with a sharp blade. The cops couldn't figure out how anyone got in. There were just too many windows and entrances, and most of the locks were old and unreliable. No real leads. My parents caught the next flight home. After that night, I never felt safe in that house again. Every hallway felt darker. Every room more sinister. And the woods outside? Even worse. A week later, just before I moved out, I thought I saw someone standing in the woods, watching the house. It was night, and it could have been a shadow, but it felt real. We sold that house a couple of months ago. And whatever haunted it, or stalked us, remains a mystery. One I hope to never revisit. Story 2. It was a pretty normal Friday night for me. I lived alone in a really small home in the suburbs but worked an hour away in the city. Finally reaching the weekend, I was ready to do absolutely nothing tonight. Just watch YouTube, game a bit, and maybe sleep in. I took a quick shower after getting home, then fired up the PlayStation and relaxed for a few hours. I even cracked open a few beers. The night was going pretty well, and I thought the only thing that could make it perfect was some pizza. I ordered from a local pizza shop using their app, then laid back on the couch to watch YouTube on the TV while I waited. After about 45 minutes, I realized I hadn't gotten any updates. I pulled out my phone and checked the app. It said there was a delay. I don't remember the exact message, but it was something generic, like, "Sorry for the delay, your order will be on the way soon." It was no big deal. I was planning to stay up late anyway, although I could feel my eyes getting heavy. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. With YouTube still playing in the background, I slowly dozed off. I woke up suddenly to the doorbell ringing, multiple times. I shot up from the couch, thinking, oh, the pizza delivery. I had no idea how long I'd been passed out or how long the delivery guy had been waiting. I hurried to the door and opened it, still groggy, and the beers from earlier weren't helping. There was a man standing on my porch. "Sorry, I hope you weren't waiting long. How much do I owe you?" I asked tiredly. The guy looked confused. I clarified, "For the pizzas, how much do I owe you?" As the words came out of my mouth, I realized something was off. He wasn't holding any pizza boxes. He didn't have a uniform either. Just dark jeans, a gray hoodie pulled over his head, and hands stuffed in his pockets. He didn't answer right away, just stared for a moment, then smiled and said not to worry, the pizzas were still on the way. Then he stopped talking, just stood there, looking at me like that was a normal answer. Even in my tired and slightly drunk state, I knew something wasn't right. Why would he be here if the pizza was still on the way? But I just said, "Okay," and closed the door after a few more awkward seconds. I rubbed my face and tried to shake it off. That interaction felt strange, but I wasn't in the best shape to analyze it. I told myself I was overthinking it. I put on another video and sat back down. Before I knew it, I had dozed off again. This time I woke up to a strange clicking sound. I didn't know what it was exactly, but the YouTube video was still running, so I knew I had only been asleep for a few minutes. I sat up and listened for a doorbell or knock, but nothing else came. I still had no clue what that sound was, and finally remembered to check the app for any updates. I opened my phone but didn't even get past the lock screen before feeling confused. It was 4 a.m. I'd placed the order at 11 p.m., and the pizza shop closed at 1 a.m. I checked the app and saw the order had been delayed for an hour before being cancelled altogether. So, who was just at my door? I got up and walked through the hallway to the front door, looking through the peephole. No one. I reached down to unlock and open the door and felt my stomach drop. It was already unlocked. I must have forgotten to lock it after answering earlier, still out of it from sleep and drinks. I opened the door and looked outside, nothing. Just a quiet, dark neighborhood. I was too tired and tipsy to deal with this weirdness. I closed the door, but the click of the latch caught my attention, and it hit me. That click was the sound I'd heard that woke me up. Suddenly, everything about that strange interaction came rushing back with horrifying clarity. That man, he wasn't the delivery guy. He was just playing along with what I said. He wasn't carrying pizza because there wasn't any. I'd told him it was for pizza, and he used that. My mind raced. What were his intentions? Why lie and pretend to be delivering something? I looked back into the dark, silent house. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I quietly crept back toward the couch to grab my phone. Just as I did, I heard something move in the other room. I panicked. I snatched my phone and bolted for the front door. I ran all the way to the end of the block before dialing 911. The cops arrived just minutes later, but it wasn't fast enough. The guy was already gone. I gave them every detail, his clothes, his face, what he said, But that's where the case has stayed. Unless something else happens, it's likely that's as far as it'll go. I think about that night often, trying to piece it all together. It still seems like the pizza order being cancelled was a freak coincidence. The scariest part is wondering what that guy really wanted. Why was he at my door at 4 a.m.? My guess is he was looking for an easy target, scouting for unlocked houses. And when I opened the door, tired, slightly drunk, and clearly not thinking straight, he probably figured he could take advantage. I'm even willing to bet he waited outside afterward, listening for the sound of a lock. When he heard nothing, he waited until I passed out again before trying to come in. Had I not woken up when I did, that night could have ended very differently. And probably not in a good way. Story 3. In mid-2019, I moved to a new town for a work opportunity. I didn't have much when I got the job and relocated, so I found the cheapest apartment possible and rented the smallest room available. It was a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a small, 4-unit complex. The building was old, outdated, and honestly not in a very nice area. For the first 3 months, I was the only one living in the complex. All 3 of the other units were vacant, which made me feel a little uneasy. But since this arrangement was only meant to be temporary, just until I saved enough money from my new job, I decided to stick it out. Work, however, turned out to be far more stressful than I had hoped. There were late nights, lots of overtime, and a generally toxic work environment. I barely spent time in my apartment aside from sleeping. One night, I got home around 8 p.m., exhausted and barely awake. As I walked inside, I took my shoes off and made my way down the hall toward my room when there was a sudden knock at my door. I jumped, startled by how unexpected it was. I hadn't seen anyone when I entered the building. Curious and still a bit dazed, I walked over and peered through the peephole. But I couldn't see anything clearly, either the glass was broken or something was smeared across it. Unsure who it could be, I cautiously opened the door. Standing very close to the doorway was an older man, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s, with dark hair and stubble. His eyes were striking, but not in a good way. There was something unsettling about them. "Can I help you?" I asked. His eyes widened a little, and after a moment, he asked if I lived there. It was a strange question, but without thinking, I simply replied, "Yeah." He smiled, then said he was moving into the unit next to mine and just wanted to introduce himself. He gave me an awkward wave and walked over to the neighboring unit, letting himself in. Strangely, he never told me his name. I chalked it up to him being a little odd but harmless. In some ways, it was even a bit comforting knowing I wasn't the only person in the building anymore. That night, I had dinner and went to bed early, gearing up for another long day. The next evening, I got back around the same time. As I walked up the outdoor stairs to my unit, I noticed the blinds shift slightly in the window of the unit next to mine, the one the old man claimed he had moved into. The way they moved made it look like someone had been watching me. Feeling uneasy, I rushed to my door and went inside. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just overthinking things. But only about 30 seconds later, there was another knock at my door. I walked back over and instinctively checked the peephole, again remembering I couldn't see anything through it. I opened the door, already guessing who it would be. Sure enough, it was the same man from the night before, looking exactly the same. "Is there something you need?" "I'm just in a bit of a rush at the moment," I said, trying not to be rude but clearly not interested in chatting. He didn't seem to care much about what I'd said. "Would you happen to know how the thermostat works in these units?" he asked, chuckling. I must be too old to figure it out. It seemed like a harmless question. I explained how it worked. It was very simple, just a couple of buttons. Hard to mess up. But then he asked if I could show him, saying he thought he'd already tried what I'd suggested. I reminded him I was in a hurry. He apologized, but then got a little passive-aggressive, insisting it would only take 30 seconds and that he really needed help. It was the middle of winter and quite cold, so I felt a bit guilty. Eventually, I gave in and said, okay, hoping it would be quick and that he'd leave me alone afterward. He led me down the balcony to his unit. The door was already open. But as soon as I stepped to the doorway and looked inside, I froze. His unit was completely empty. No furniture. No boxes. Nothing. The walls were peeling, the floor was filthy, and worst of all, there was a putrid smell coming from inside. It was immediately clear, this place hadn't been rented out. He didn't live there. The man noticed me hesitating and looked back. "Come on, it's just right here," he said. I was scrambling for an excuse not to go in when his tone suddenly shifted. He told me again to come inside, but this time it wasn't friendly. His expression turned cold and threatening. He took a step toward me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran back to my unit, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Seconds later, I heard the doorknob to my apartment jiggling. He was trying to open it. I immediately called the police. For a moment, the man paused. It felt like he was listening to what I was doing. Then he called out in a friendly tone, asking what was wrong, saying he just needed help. He knocked a few more times, then silence. I heard his footsteps fade as he finally left. When the police arrived, the man was gone. They checked the unit next door and confirmed it was still listed as vacant. He had broken in and had been squatting there for days, likely watching me, tracking when I came and went. I have no doubt that things could have ended much worse if I'd stepped into that apartment or let the situation continue. Who knows what he was planning? I moved out as soon as I possibly could.